Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're gonna cover React.js and React Native lifecycle methods. What are they? How do we use them? What do they mean? What are some examples? How do I implement them? My name is Jeremy. I'm a full stack JavaScript developer / engineer. And in this video, I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know to get started. Let's jump in. So first, I want to conceptually speak on this just so you guys can understand why we need these and when we use these and how do we use these. Why do we need these, really? So you have the class-based functions or helpers here. These are all the lifecycle methods for a class-based function. This is, you'll see a bunch of mutations of the useEffect for the functional component. So a component that's like function name, and then you have your function or your component, which all your logic goes in here, right? So say you want to make an API request, and so you have your component here, and then say when you want to load that, when that component loads or renders, it's going to make a request to the server, and then that server will then respond back with some data. So that's one example of when a component mounts. Another example would be, say I have a variable var1. When var1 updates with this sort of format here, it will then rerun all of this logic again. So every time var1 updates, all of this logic runs once again. Whereas if we didn't have that there, if we just had an empty space there, then that would do nothing. It would just mount on the first render. So when it first mounts, makes that API request, server sends back to the client, updates logic. So one example would be like, say you need to gather the information from your database to then render it or display it in a table or whatever you want to do in your component. That's when you would use the initial hook without the value assigned within those brackets. And we'll talk about that more in detail. Or say you want to fetch every time a change occurs. So if someone leaves a comment, you want to fetch all of those comments once again because they're updated, they're new, they're live, and you can do that. So here in our functional component, as you can see, it's a functional component. We're going to use our useEffects in different ways, right? So this is the mount format. This is the data updating format. So you have your function, your callback here of the useEffect, and then you have your variable that every time that changes, it updates. And then you have any update here. This just changes upon any state change, it'll render again. And then this one is upon data 1 updating or unmounting as well. So see, notice the brackets here. So there's one function callback. This has 2 callbacks right there, as well as this one right here has 2 callbacks, and that one's strictly on unmount. So like say this component mounts and then unmounts, or you change the page essentially, this would run, this would run, however these would not run. This one would run as well as any update, but these two, that's only on mount, and that's, so let me give you an example. Let's go to the class-based component and let me show you that example. But this is where you would mount your API request. So if I copy this and I make this and expand this out bigger to make it more legible, you could do your API request to fetch your data here, right? And so let's look at the class-based component here. So you got componentDidMount, which means it mounted. It's the same thing as the useEffect, the very top one, this one right here. And then we have the componentDidUpdate, and I commented out this comparison, but basically what you would do is take the previous props and you can compare that value, data 1. We don't have that prop value here, but if you had that prop value, you can compare it to this component's, so this right here, this component's props, data 1. So you can basically compare the previous prop state to the next prop state, see if there was any change. As well as previous state, as you could do the same thing. So I'm going to comment that back out. And then you have componentWillUnmount. And so this is when the component or the page changes or the component disappears. So in this working example, I have a timer here that sets an interval, right, for every 5, we'll change this to every 1500. So every second and a half, or 1500 milliseconds, it is going to log this right here. And then so we set that, we assign that to the timer state, which is assigned right here, created right here. And then that way, when the component unmounts, it'll clear that interval. It'll clear that timer because we're assigning the set interval to the timer value. And then the state, and then we just clear with that state value. So this is what the class-based kind of components, I guess, the lifecycle methods look like. Let's go back to this one here. So this would be a good example of where you would fetch your data for your application. If you wanted to render code in here, that's where you would fetch it. And then if you have like timers or maybe like event listeners, stuff like that, that would also go in here. And this is good for updating state, right? So if you say you have a on click, let's have a button here. Let's add a button on click. This clicked, and then we won't assign much. We'll just put gibberish click me. Okay, and then we need to create the function to help that function, that on click handler. All right, so here's our function. Perfect. Okay, so say I update. Let's take data 1 away. And let's assign that as const. We're going to create some state here. Set state, use state. So we're just creating a basic state object, and we're going to do data 1 equals null. Okay, so this is null, that's null, that's null. And we need to basically break that state off. We need to deconstruct that so we can access it here and here. State. We could have just done, you know, like maybe state blah whatever, but it's just cleaner this way. Okay, so I'm going to give that a save. We have our state created now. Okay, so if I take this handler and I do set state, previous state, I take that previous state, I keep it, but then I only update data 1 to say 1, and then now so I have this deconstructed. It's created the state here. So in this useEffect, it's going to change. That will render when I click this button. So it'll update that state or run some logic or whatever you want to do really when this data updates. This will also update, but it also runs on Unmount. So you don't need all of these at one time. I'm just using them all in one example to show you guys what lifecycle methods look like and how can you use them in the real world. Ideally, you want to concatenate or reduce or minimize how many of these use effects you have. I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope this brought some clarity to lifecycle methods and React.js and React Native. By the way, the same principle of useEffect in the class-based components here. This applies in both React Native and React.js, so kind of cross-platform. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates.